is a representative of the North Texas Small Business Development Center. And he is here today to share with you how to fund your businesses, how to find resources and opportunities to help turn your plans into reality. He has had extensive experience as a business owner in the consulting area for the past 20 years, and now works with the SBDC. So I'm delighted to introduce him to you, and we are going to allow some time for him to present, and as well as questions and answers. And at the end of the session, we have here a sign-up sheet with some flyers and business cards. So if any of you are interested in signing up for this free service that he provides through his agency, please fill out the sign-in sheet at the end and grab a card and a flyer. So make sure you pass through this part and put all your information there. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Flores. Okay, so my name is Britt Krhovjak, and before we get started on the topic of the day, I wanted to just share a little bit about myself. So I have a graduate degree from UNT, and I actually worked here in various finance positions, including a little stint as the controller of the university for about 20 years. And then recently moved on to working for the local college, NCTC. And at the same time, I've also been a small business owner. So I have the perspective of the finance and the entrepreneurial experience to help share with you. And so let me first tell you a little bit about SBDC, Small Business Development Center. So again, I'm an employee of the local college, NCTC, and there are about 50 SBDC offices in the state of Texas. And is there anyone here who's ever heard of our office or an office, SBDC? Okay, we get this reaction a lot, even though we've been here for a long, long time, and the services we provide are free, which we think would be a fairly good marketing tool. But because our office is funded by the local college and by the SBA federal government, there's restrictions on using federal tax dollars for advertising purposes. So we can't put a billboard out. So we're mainly word of mouth as far as attracting new clients in the business. So I actually office locally here in Denton, in the Denton Chamber of Commerce. So I'm not too far. And if you hear something that piques your interest, or you have a need for more information, or actually want a full-blown advising session, happy to have you contact me, and we'll schedule it up, and we'll do kind of an A to Z discussion on what it is you would like to do. So what are the different services that the SBDC does for our clients? Well, we look for anyone who wants to start a business but doesn't even know what the first step is. And there are a lot of steps. And think of it as a series of dominoes, and you can't or shouldn't start with step 15. What we help organize you is starting with step 2, then 3, then 4, to ensure that whatever it is you're wanting doing has the legal structure and the business office structure you need to succeed. I've found with many, many clients that they're very good at their mission or what they want to do or sell, and they just dive headlong into that, headfirst into that, and then do the back office part, catch up later. Well, there's legal risk with that, and it's always harder catching it up as opposed to doing it right from the first time. So that's what we help do for startups. Also, existing businesses that want to grow, maybe they need demographic information on customers. Radius type of information, like how many potential customers for your industry from your exact location in a 5, 10, 15 mile radius. We can give you a list of those names and their addresses, and then you can come up with whatever marketing or direct mail approach you might want to consider to attract those customers. And we can help with those marketing plans as well. Also, existing businesses are distressed, which is code for they're having cash flow problems. We help those as well. They usually come to see us in more dire straits. It's like we've got to have some additional funding right now, or we cannot pay our bills the next month type situations. And so oftentimes we can help work through those situations and come up with options for that particular client that may help bridge that gap. Business plan development. If you if you are a small business startup and you are planning to obtain external financing of any kind, bank loan, small business loan, investor money, you're going to have a business plan. And I know that you're familiar with them, where you have a narrative part that has an executive summary and your marketing plan and your assumptions. And then the second half of it, which is going to be most important for the lender, is going to be your financial projections. Balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement, all in a pro forma format, meaning because you don't have past business experience, they want you to project what your business is going to earn, spend, and your cash flow, usually for 3 years going forward. And we can help with the methodology approach to come up with some kind of sound numbers, because a lender is going to question your assumptions and make sure that if they're going to risk giving you a loan, that loan is viable and will cash flow every month sufficiently enough to cover the debt service for the loan, plus have a little bit left over for the business owner's personal needs, because you have to have cash as well to live, of course. Alrighty, another option I just wanted to really briefly talk with you about is government contracting, and it's often an overlooked customer segment. So there's a lot of government everywhere, federal, state, and local, especially in Denton. And a government agency is not allowed to pay for services above a certain dollar amount unless they actually go out for bid. So they have websites and they list all the services that they want vendors to bid on. And so with that fail, most every client that I've ever seen does have those types of options where they can bid on. And if you can get a government contract, those can be real gravy, because they're going to have a definite start and end date. And so you know for that whole period you've got revenue coming in, as long as you don't default on that contract. And so Dr. Clore asked me to speak just real quickly about the types of small businesses that I've assisted with personally that might be interesting to the group. So definitely have worked with an instrument repair shop locally. It was a complete startup. We don't know how to take step one. And they did a great job, and they were able to obtain the financing they need, and it was with a lot of hard work, and they're still successful through today. So that was definitely a win-win. And then also on the kind of the arts side of it, I have a client that I'm working with right now who wants to create a television and film academy, a teaching school. So they have all this movie development experience from California and from New York City. And now what they want their mission to be is to teach students who are interested in that. And their market is going to be college level students and also senior citizens in Denton who might just have an interest in it. So it'll be an academy, and they'll have financial aid opportunities, and they found a location, and we're real interested in that. And getting that up and going. Another thing that our office does as far as book work goes, because typically book work isn't the most interesting part of a small business, but it is one of the most important parts, where you keep track of your revenues and your expenses. So you can see on a monthly basis what your net income is, and more importantly, what your cash flow is. Income statement, cash flow statement are two completely different things. Income statement is simply revenue minus expense is your net income. Cash flow is, all right, you have this money in the bank, here's how I'm going to earn more money, here's how I'm going to spend that money per month. And at the bottom line, the number needs to be positive enough to pay for your monthly debt service on an external loan. That's what a banker is going to look for. Also, you need enough on that bottom line to give you living expenses, which when you first start a business, as you can imagine, are pretty tight. It's the hardest time, it's the most expensive time. So we help with that as well. Another area, our last area I'm going to talk about before we talk about funding options, is research assistance. So since we're a government agency, we have access to lots of databases that help our clients. So if you're looking for certain customers in a certain area, we can pull that information for you, customers for your type of industry, for you, names, addresses, and then help you with a marketing plan on how to attract those customers. Also, competitors. You obviously don't want to put your business location in a place that's next door to several competitors. So in the Denton area, we know who does instrument repair or whatever it is you might be interested in doing and can give you what your competitors are. Also look at just the industry in total and look at current state and trend analysis to see, are you getting yourself into something that's truly viable? As from a national or regional perspective, what's the growth of that? And how successful you might be if it's a saturated market and what you might have an interest in, a little tougher. But Wickenville reporting shows you if it is, if it's not, if 5-year trends, 3% growth rate, you may have found a real niche that you can make some money in. So, is it okay so far? Any questions so far?
With the bookkeeping that you mentioned before, do you offer, you can go over your books with businesses, or you offer services that do bookkeeping for the businesses?
Yeah, so great question. Everybody hear that? So my office, what we do is advise. We do advising and consultation services. So for example, I'm a certified QuickBooks trainer. So if you need to learn QuickBooks, which is the by far market share for small business owners, and you buy the software, you need to get your business set up, and you need to learn how to do certain things, I can help with that. We don't offer bookkeeping services like on a retainer basis, though. We can refer you to folks that do, but my hope, especially as a small business startup, is you get comfortable enough with QuickBooks that you do it yourself. I happen to think it's easy. We can get you there too, if that's what you'd like to do. And save that external cost. All right, so on to what we're here to really talk about, I believe, is external financing options. Lots of times small businesses don't start with a lot of, we call it equity injection, personal cash, or collateral that they can throw into a loan. But any lender that you might go to, whether it be conventional or an SBA lender, they're going to want some skin in the game, anywhere from 10% up to 25%. So what that means is if we do an analysis of your startup and we determine your initial cash need is going to be $100,000, which is small, by the way, $100,000, that would include your one-time startup cost plus the first few months of your operating costs, because you're not going to be gangbusters revenue on day one. Take a conservative approach. And so we look at that in total. And so let's say it's $100K. Well, you just know from right now, from me sharing this with you, that you're going to have to come up with cash or a comp of cash and collateral of $10,000, $15,000, or $20,000. So if your mindset is along the entrepreneurial path, which I hope it is, I'm excited about it. I think it can be a very rewarding career. You're going to have to save that cash, or make sure you have collateral, or make sure you have someone who can gift you cash, maybe with a under the table agreement that, okay, I'll pay you back over a 30-year period, like a parent or something. So just keep that in mind, because that often is the biggest barrier, is that equity injection. Okay, now collateral too, we'll talk about that for just a little bit. Collateral doesn't mean, it can be the vehicle you own, or let's say that you just purchased a house. It can be the house that you have, or if you're lucky enough already to have like a 401 type qualified savings fund, that can be too. But you have to remember, it's not the car that's collateral, it's the ownership in the car. And a lot of people stumble about this. So if you've just financed a car 100%, you have zero collateral. If you paid it off halfway, then you have 50% collateral that you can pledge as part of that capital injection. So instead of coming up with 10K, maybe you have to have 5K in cash and you pledge a portion of your car. That makes sense? Okay. So conventional loans. This is, you go to a regular bank and you say, I need $100,000 loans for a startup business. Typically what you're going to find is they're going to want more money from you, more of a down payment than the 10, 15, or 20. Their rates are going to be higher. because you're going to be considered a more risky customer, and the term of the loan is likely to not be as favorable. So for startups, we usually don't recommend the conventional loan route. We recommend the SBA loan route. Now, have most of us heard of SBA? Small Business Administration? Okay, so that's a federal agency whose purpose in life is to support the development of small business, which is the backbone of the country. And so they have dollars earmarked where they're willing to assume more risk than a traditional bank. They give more favorable interest rates and more favorable terms, again, because you're a small business. The application process for them is a little more cumbersome, but I would guess, looking at the kind of the age group in the room, that if every one of you wanted to start a small business pretty soon, probably 99% of you would go through a small business loan type of situation. So what we would do is when you've got your business plan and all your permits and everything all set up, all those dominoes that have fallen into, we would refer you to an SBA lender. And we have relationships with several of them in the local area. And we would take your loan packaging, which is all that is, and we would present that to them for them to analyze. And then, of course, they'll want additional information. And then if they feel it's viable, they will sell that loan to the federal government, SBA. If SBA agrees, SBA will come in and they will guarantee to that bank that 50% of your loan, in the event that it defaults, would be reimbursed by SBA. So let me say that again. $100,000 loan, if it's an SBA loan, $50K of that is covered by the federal government in the event of default. The bank would only have to come up with the other $50K, which makes it far less risky for a bank. That's why banks love them. That's why they're easier to qualify for. That money is set aside for that. So most likely, that's what most in this room would go for. There's different types of SBA loans. There's ones to purchase of real estate. So let's say you were really aggressive and you didn't want to lease a space in a strip center. Let's say you wanted your own property, your own brick and mortar building. You wanted to own your world. So there's a variety of SBA approaches. So there's a loan that's called a 504. It's just for real estate and for the equipment put up on it. And then there's a 7A loan, which is for working capital, because don't forget, you get your loan for your assets and whatnot, but you're going to need working capital too to survive those first few months. Unless you have another source of income, a spouse maybe that has enough income to cover all of your household expenses. So a lot of times it's a combination. And then as far as the speed of SBA loans, so there's one type called an SBA Express loan. The rates are usually a little higher, not much, still very, very competitive, more competitive than a conventional bank. Application is easier, and they can have money, and believe it or not, actually direct deposited in your bank account in 2 days. So it's an express process, and so that's out there to be considered. Now, what product would fit best with you? That's what will be decided when you go to your SBA lender. They'll give you all your options. They'll look at your business plan and your financial information, what your need is as far as when you would like to start, and they'll select the best product for you. We facilitate that and can attend that meeting with the lender as well to ensure that we agree that they're giving you the best product as well. So we would be your advocate. Microloans. Who's heard of microloans? No one ever knows. So there's a whole new industry out there called microloans, which are very small dollar loans, let's say anywhere from $10,000 to $350,000, that can be processed very quickly with less application effort that many small business owners love to tap into as far as their first loan. Rates are good, terms are good. It's just an easier way to secure a smaller amount of money right away. And so we work with those lenders as well. All right, advantages that you might have when applying for a loan. Now, these are government loans, so there's, kind of protected classes, advantage classes that money has been earmarked or set aside for just for those groups. That would include minority-owned, a woman-owned, a veteran-owned, or a disabled-owned business. So if you fall in any of those categories, and if it's a spouse relationship, and let's say you want to be considered a woman-owned business, then you would structure it so the woman owns 51% and the other spouse owns 49%. We could help you with all of that structure. That gives you a lot more application power when you apply. Really love those classes if you qualify for them. The final class of lending opportunities that I want to speak with you about is completely outside of the banking world, no SBA, no conventional loan, and that would be an investor. Investors are different in that they're real risk averse, and they have lots of cash, and they want to spend that cash to help a good business idea that they believe in, but there's a cost. They're going to actually want to own a percentage. And the interest rate is typically going to be higher. So with an investor, of course, you never want to give them more than 50% controlling interest, but a lot of folks find that's their only route, and so they're willing to give up, 40, 45% controlling interest in the business to get that initial loan. And of course, the revenues are split. They get their 45%, and the interest rate is higher. So typically better to get those and be done with those as soon as possible, because once you have an established business record, 3 years worth, it's a lot easier to get a loan from a bank or from the SBA because you've proven that you're a success. Any questions about that?
Could you talk more about the network of angel investors that you all have and how you created that and how that works in terms of matching them with the entrepreneurs that come to your offices?
Yeah.
How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, you bet. It's great point. So depending where the business is located or what type of business it is, we can provide you a list of investors, often called angel investors, although sometimes they're not so angel. Depends on how much of the business they want to own. We can provide that list to you, and then they're each going to have their own separate application process, and we can help you with that as well. There's a variety of them from A to Z. Really recommend that would be kind of a last resort if possible, but it is definitely a viable option, and plenty of people take advantage of them. We just like that exposure to be shorter, get them paid off, regain the full ownership or 50-50 if you have a spouse, and control your business better. Well, I promised that I would spend about 20 minutes on my piece. Looks like I've done that. Maybe a little, sorry, just a little bit longer.
That's fine.
And spend the bulk of the time answering questions you might have. I actually love working with entrepreneurs. They're just the best people. I have one of the greatest jobs I have ever had. So I'm very interested in hearing what you say, and if you think that we can help you, so excited to do that.
And it's free.
It's free, yes.
I was wondering, does your organization help start up nonprofits at all?
No, it's one more catered to for-profit industry. Yeah.
Are there any organizations here in the Denton area that work with nonprofits that have that kind of niche, other than Stoke that works with all types of businesses? Or
Right.
Are you familiar with any sort of organization that works with nonprofits?
Yes, yeah. So there are nonprofit agencies or associations whose mission is to fund other nonprofits. Like you can apply and get a $5,000 loan or whatnot. So you would tap it for initial funding. You would kind of tap into one of those to get your initial funding. It's the city level, state level, and federal level. And then whatever your not-for-profit mission is, start collecting those membership fees or whatever other tax-exempt purpose where you generate your revenue just as soon as possible.
And do you have any names off the top of your head, or can you maybe send me that info later in terms of what would these organizations look like? How could our students find, because many of them are arts-based, nonprofit type businesses.
Right.
And many of them are for-profit, so we have a mix here. But do you have like a database or directory of those nonprofits that support other nonprofits?
We do. The largest state funder for the arts is the Texas Commission on the Arts.
Right.
And I actually, on my small business, one of my clients is a not-for-profit business, and they tap into funding from TCA every year to help make their budget balance. Of course, now with the not-for-profit, you're going for break even, right? You're not supposed to make excess revenue because that threatens your exempt status. If you make excess revenue over and over, then you're kind of a for-profit business. So it's zero-based budgets for not-for-profits, and you need only enough revenue to cover your expenses with a zero at the bottom is the goal.
But even those nonprofits do require a history of the nonprofit. I know I have a student who's creating her nonprofit, and she still hasn't been able to qualify for all of those organizations because they don't have the 3 years of history for the organization and things like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even in the case of nonprofits, they have to demonstrate that they have been successful enterprise for a specific amount of time before they can apply for funding and things like that.
Absolutely right, and that's the rub for the newer entrepreneurs that don't have the experience, because like for a TCA application, they want to see prior year tax returns, your
Exactly.
prior year balance sheet, P&L, cash flow, board of director information, depending on how it's structured, in order to qualify for a loan. So it is tougher if you're just starting out.
So what are the options you can encourage our students to consider, given that whether you're going the nonprofit route or the for-profit route, getting financing at the very, very beginning is very difficult, and it's unlikely that you will be able to get traditional ways of, either through a bank or through a nonprofit organization.
Right.
What are the alternatives that you recommend they consider in terms of fundraising and ways to get their business off the ground?
Yes, so fundraising or any access you might have to some cash that's gifted to you, like from a parent maybe, or anything. The main goal is to save, because any loan's going to require you to have that initial 10, 15, 20%. Just remind me about something too. And credit score. If you are not an established business, your credit score is important. So lenders usually look for credit scores of 580 or higher. And we can all look up our FICO scores, right? They're with our credit card statements, and there's free services. So take a look at that. If your credit is lower, it's not the end of the world, but in addition to saving cash, our first order of business is going to be to repair that credit. Do whatever we need to get that up to that 680, 700 range. If you're below that, a lender really, even an SBA lender, is going to have a tough time reviewing the application.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
So with investor loans, when they get the ownership stake, when they give you funds, is reclaiming ownership based on just paying off the loan, or would you also have to communicate with them personally about, am I going to get this back, or could they just hold on to it if that's what they want to do?
Say that very last part again.
Could they just hold on to the ownership stake if they wanted to?
Well, it depends on the agreement, the contract you have with that investor. So I would encourage you, anyone who is using my advising services, to let me take a look at the agreement before you sign it, because what we want is a certain amount of money for a certain period of time, be paid off over time, and then that investor exits and you retain full ownership. Now, there's exceptions. So maybe the investor is a parent, and you're okay with them owning 40% of the business, and they don't want any of the income anyway, and it just works okay for a while. But most external investors that you don't know, they're going to take a hard look at the viability, and they're going to charge you for that risk. So it can work either way. I would certainly advise there to be some type of end date to it over time.
So once the loan is paid off, then the entrepreneur retains 100% of the equity back again.
That's what we would recommend the agreement says. Because, there'll have to be an application process with that investor where you work out all the details about what happens later, and that's how we would recommend that it be structured.
How about investors that provide loans without equity? Have you had any of those that only provide a loan for an interest rate and not equity involved as well?
That's right. So the only type of loan that you're going to really be able to access would be an investor loan if you have zero capital injection, no collateral, no money, investor's going to really be your only route, and they know it. So it's going to be a little more expensive to go that route, but that's what they're there for. And plenty paid them off, and they thrive.
Have you had any investors who've given loans without asking for equity, or does it always generally come hand in hand, the equity in addition to the interest rate?
Investors would typically give you a loan without any personal equity.
Oh, okay, without any ownership of the business.
That's why people turn to them kind of as a last resort, so to speak, because again, your interest rate terms are going to be higher.
But
Yeah.
there are some who are willing to
Right.
to loan without taking a chunk of your business.
A bank wouldn't do that because of the risk.
Right.
Investor would because they want you to pay them for the risk.
And of course, it has to do with the type of business and the relationship with the investor and how much they find your business attractive and
Right.
viable. And it's, in the case of the arts, it's also a matter of finding the right type of match, right,
Right.
with the right type of person.
And what is the main document that investor is going to be looking at?
Asset class.
What is it?
Cash flow.
Yes. Business plan development. There's lots of links to help you with that process. I certainly can advise you and review those as you go through the different phases of them as well. But that's the key document.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in our classes, we often write a business plan and then pitch it to the class after we've developed each part of it, like the marketing plan
I
and
love that.
financials. And so the pitch that we do, we pretend that the rest of the class is a room full of investors.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just wondering what your experience is with that, if you've seen people pitch to investors, and what does that look like? Are they using a PowerPoint? Are they just, what information are they highlighting?
Yeah, what it usually is just written information that's supplied to them. A copy of the business plan, there's a bunch of documents that go in the process. You have 3 years worth of tax returns and your personal debt schedule. They want to look at the entire financial picture. Typically it's not an in-person type of thing where you're presenting at a podium, kind of like what I'm talking about with you. And okay, so if y'all are evaluating each other's business plans, the key thing to check are the assumptions for the revenue. Because you can put whatever number you need to make that bottom line come positive. So double check the assumptions, and they should be written down on how that revenue can be. If it's not reasonable, it's a pretty good indicator the business won't be viable. You can put whatever number. It's just you got to be able to collect it. Yeah, it's a great question.
Other questions?
Can you talk more about like financial software? You recommend QuickBooks. Are there any other options out there that you might recommend, or for any reasons?
Yes, there's a bunch of different accounting software. QuickBooks is the lion's share industry leader. Really recommend that one because if you have a question of how to do something, a lot of people know the answer to it because they also use QuickBooks. And for myself, of all the software that I train on, I'm certified for QuickBooks because that's what everybody uses. So, but there are. Yeah, for sure.
Other questions? I'm so glad you talked about the difference between the income statement and cash flow statement because that's something we were talking about in class
Right.
recently. In terms of the balance sheets, can you talk a little bit more about why that's important and how that can give, important insight into the business and how investors look at that and what are the aspects that are most important in understanding the overall equity of the business?
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so what is a balance sheet? It is not a P&L. It is a snapshot in time, like as of today, what your business and personal assets are as of today, all your assets, things that you own, or like a house, a car, or whatnot, offset by your liabilities. So if you own 100% on a house, that asset is offset by that liability, and in that case, you have zero net worth. Does that make sense? You want to say it again?
Say it again.
Okay, so you have all your assets. Let's just keep it simple. Let's say you have a car and a mortgage, a home. Alrighty? That's on your asset side. Now on the liability side, which follows, how much do you own on that house and that car? If you own everything, then the plus minus the negative is zero net worth. You don't have any worth. Now, let's say you have the house paid for and the car paid for. Then you have no liability, no obligation to pay that back, and your net worth at that point is the value of the car or the house. So a lender's going to be looking for positive net worth. If you're going to be incurring more debt to finance your business, then that's going to affect your net worth because you're going to have less of it because you're going to have more of a liability. So that's why they look at balance sheet. Income statement is simple, like we said, revenue minus expense equal bottom line. But how that's different from cash flow is, for example, let's say you invoice your customers over time. So you do the service, you send them an invoice, and they don't pay you for 30 days. Well, what if the bills come in for what you incurred for those 30 days? Yes, you don't have a payment to cover it. That's where cash flow comes in. Because cash flow is just real cash. What's in your bank? What have you added to it? What will be coming out of this month to pay for bills that do not wait? And that bottom line should be positive enough to cover your debt service on your loan. So, cash flow statement of all of the three is the one that a lender will look at the most. You've heard cash is king, cash flow crunch is the worst. That can shut down a business. If you cannot pay your vendors, even though you know the money's coming and your business is going to be successful, if you can't pay your bills, it will shut down your business.
You're bankrupt, yeah.
Working capital is a very important part of a loan because it gives you that starting cash needed to pay your obligations. While you wait for your business to gin up enough revenue so that it becomes your cash flow to pay your expenses. Yeah.
When it comes to small businesses and whether or not you're going to like form a corporation or not, and so your like personal assets aren't part of that balance, like what is that generally the route to go?
It's okay, so if you're a small business and you're wanting to what?
Okay, so it's more of like, I may be wording this wrong, so my apologies if I am, but when you have your balance sheet, and is that just the assets and liabilities for like your business, or would it be also like your personal ones if you like owned a house and a car that you might?
Great question. For a startup business, that lender's going to look at both.
Okay.
Now, typically for your business at that point, you would have very few assets and very few liabilities because you had no way to purchase them
Yeah.
unless you finance. So they're going to look more heavily at your personal balance sheet to ensure that you have enough money to come up with the required capital injection, that skin in the game piece that you're going to need for your business to be successful. So they'll look at both. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different forms that you can imagine with the government. You have a personal financial statement and you have your business financial statement, and they look at both.
They're separate documents though.
Mm-hmm.
How about break-even analysis? Talk to us about that, because that's something so important in terms of strategizing. How is that going to happen, and at what point is that going to happen? And many businesses start without a real, forecast of what that looks like and
Right.
when they're going to be able to aspire to break even.
Yeah.
So how do you cover that topic with your entrepreneurs that you advise?
Okay, super duper question. So when you do your business plan, as you guys may already realize, you have to forecast what your revenue is going to be for, I don't know the time period.
6 months.
Okay. It's typically 3 years out for a lender, but let's say 6 months. Those assumptions have to be rock solid because that's going to dictate your break-even status. So you have your profit and loss that will show you on a monthly basis, revenue minus expense is a positive and negative is zero. So that'll show you break-even, but it's cash flow that's king. So in your business plan, if you don't have enough cash to finance your initial operations, that's a really good indicator right there that you're not going to be break-even. So revenue expectations, really review those, scrub those to make sure that you feel like you can correct them. I would recommend be a little more conservative as opposed to aggressive. And again, you get your financial statements all filled out and you see, uh-oh, I'm not forecasting enough, so I'm just going to change this number. So be careful about doing that. for the classroom exercise, maybe not so terrible, but if you were to go to a bank, it would be a deal breaker.
Well, students in these classes are also preparing them for competitions where they're going to be really having a chance to win actual money. Our entrepreneurship competition is held in the spring of the year.
Yeah.
So it's important that the financials are as accurate as possible because they will have an actual cap at the end of the event if they're able to make the case.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So we certainly encourage them to be as accurate as they can.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? Has anyone had any experience applying for a loan yet or reaching out for funding, anything like that? For your business, anything like that?
So I have one hand over here, and I'm going to ask. So don't share, of course, the dollar amount, but who did you turn to get your initial external financing?
Yeah, so we tried to get a bank loan, but we're both still, well, I'm a student still. My husband was recently out of work, but out of school, but doing his own repair. So neither of us had a W-2 job, so it was actually really hard to get a bank loan because of our student loan. So our income to debt ratio was
That's right.
not great.
Right.
So we actually went the friends and family route.
Okay. Did you happen to go to a bank that also specialized in SBA loans?
No, I remember thinking about SBA loans. I don't know why we never went through with that process.
Because most don't, because it's a whole extra government yuck process that banks sometimes don't want to fool with.
Mm-hmm.
So we would typically advise, we have a list of those that we could have sent you to, and you could have explored that route.
And I think what's the quick loan? I think you talked about it where you can apply and in 48 hours you have the money.
Express loan.
We tried to do that, and then we were going to get that money and then apply for an SBA loan and pay that back and then just have the SBA loan, but we ended up just going friends and family route, and we didn't have to take out as much as we thought, so it was a smaller amount, so we just left it.
Right. And your repayment terms to them, I'm assuming, are a little easier?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, much better interest rate.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So, but now that Jen has experience, business experience, and proven track record, and a good P&L, cash flow, balance sheet, would they go for that next loan, which might be needed to expand their business? Maybe they want to buy a van to deliver stuff or pick up stuff. They'll be in a lot better position to go through the more traditional route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's nice now to have actual numbers. I think the hardest part about starting is making those assumptions, and you you're doing market research and trying to get real numbers, but it also feels like you're just picking them out of thin air.
Yeah.
So just trust the process, then you'll have real numbers. And now we're up to 1 year of business, so we actually have.
Yeah, congratulations. The not success rate is pretty high for startups. So yeah, definitely congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you talk to us a little bit more before we finish on the market research that you're able to help entrepreneurs with in terms of finding the demographic analysis and the clients and their contact information? That is a very valuable service that you provide in finding the right type of network for the entrepreneurs. So could you talk a little bit more about that process? And do you have how do you go about finding that information and figuring out where these clients are?
Yeah, so key is location. You want your business in a place where it can succeed. You want to find that, that untapped need, and you want to put your business that addresses that in a great location. You want to know who your customers are, and you want to know how close your competition is. So we have access to government databases because we're a government agency.
Oh, wow.
So if you were to give me your exact business location, I could produce a report that shows your potential customers, again, a 5, a 6, a 7 mile radius, a list of names and addresses. And with that, you could decide what type of direct marketing you might want to do. There's different options, and we can help you with more efficient ones. But that can be a lot less expensive and more powerful than a blanket mailing of little advertising flyers to everyone in a zip code that we all just toss in the mail.
Yeah. So you have government data because you're a government entity with all that information on the addresses and so you also have the behaviors, the ages, all of that as well?
Yeah, so there's one report, and it's called an IBIS report. And luckily, you and I don't have to pay for it, but these reports are $1,000 a piece. And they show for your industry and for your area what the current status of the industry is. Is it saturated? Is there growth? Plus the trend out for the next 5 years. I love the reports, and they're very reliable.
That is huge.
We can get a list of your competitors too in the city of Denton or whatever market
You can smash.
Yeah. you would.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, any final questions? We good? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Go me
Britt.
green.